Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. We're getting a little bit festive here, and this week I'm going to be making this Christmas themed cabin 1/76 scale using Foamex, a couple of old wooden blocks and an old tea light from Halloween. So let's get down to the workbench and I'll show you how it's done. So for the base, the first thing I'm going to do is glue the blocks together to make a square. If I had a bit more time, the best results would be to use wood glue and clamps, but for speed I'm going to use super glue and some activator spray. This spray is just like magic and speeds up the setting time using something much more practical like science, so almost instant. And with the pieces magically glued together with science, I have a nice solid base. And as you can see, I've just cut a hole in this for this cheap candle light I picked up at Halloween. This was the smallest hole saw I had, but even then it's a bit big, so with the crafty use of a piece of craft foam, I wrapped the tea light with foam until I had the right diameter. Now it's pretty good tight fit. Then shaved off the excess and used a piece of scrap 2mm Foamex to pack the base up to the height of the tea light, and voila, the perfect base. So now we come to the cabin. Now we always start with a template. This cabin template is actually available from my store. The link is down below if you want to have a go. Please let me know in the comments if you do so. I'd love to hear what you think. So the first part we're going to have to do is cut out that main wall template. We'll just cut that out from the rest of the template. That little piece at the bottom there will be on a piece of thinner card, so we can discard that for the time being. So we'll just start off with the main walls, and the first thing we want to do with this is scribe the planking detailing. I'm going to cut out the apertures for the window and the door later on. So with my trusty engineer's scribe and a metal ruler, I'm just going to follow those plank lines and gently scribe the detail in. Now what you'll find with the glued down paper is sometimes the glue can still be a little bit wet and you can end up with tearing, so you just have to be careful here and just gently scribe, like I say, the surface of those planks in place. Just scribing all the way down to the bottom. Now you can just go up to the apertures, you don't have to go all the way through those. Those originally had frames drawn on, but we're going to fill those in with thin pieces of card afterwards, so we don't need to worry about going right through the frames. As you can see, it does take a little bit of care trying to get those planks engraved in, but it's worth taking the care because that's what gives it its finish. Then once that's been scribed in, we can then cut out the shapes of the doors and the window. So a nice sharp scalpel blade. Always make sure you've got a sharp scalpel blade when you're cutting through Foamex, otherwise it does tend to tear. And as you can see, I've torn the paper a little bit there. Doesn't really matter because it's just a surface template and that's going to come off eventually. So again, take some time. It's always worth cutting from the corners when you're cutting out the windows and doors. So cut away from the corner and just keep spinning your work round until you've got the hole cut out. Once those openings are cut out, we can cut out the shape of the hut itself. Now this is all in one piece. We're going to eventually fold it together, so we don't want to cut out the individual walls, we just want to create the full piece as shown here. Once that's cut out, just rub over the surface with a fine grade sandpaper. That's going to do two purposes. One, it's going to create a little bit of texture onto the walls, and two, it's going to give the eventual paint a key to sit on. One thing I've missed off from doing here that I have not shown was going back over the planks again with the engineer's scribe just to create a bit of extra depth. But now to create the wood grain on the Foamex, just use this cheap wire brush and just take some time holding it firmly in place just to gently brush over the surface, creating some lovely wooden grain texture. if it's done just right, you can really bring some nice texture to the surface. So just go over the whole piece. Then once that's done, using a small set square or a very steady eye, just cut in some very shallow grooves down the edges of each of the framed piece of wall. You can actually cut through the template if you want more of a guide to see where those are, but we're just creating some score lines so we can fold it all together. So now, as you can see, if you've cut that properly, then you can just gently tease those corners in. It minimises the amount of gluing, so we just need that one piece at the very end. But before we can glue it all together, we just need to put the door in place. There's a little piece. So for that door, we're going back to the glue that with a little bit of glue from the glue stick. And then once that's glued down onto the piece of Foamex, we can do the same as we did on the outer panels and just score in those door lines, making sure we get around the edges as well, so it gives us an indication exactly where it needs to be placed. Once the scoring's finished, we can just trim out the door piece as per the guidelines. Then once that's cut out, we can just peel the rest of the paper template off the surface and just run over it with a piece of light grade sandpaper, like we did for the walls of the cabin. Just taking off the glue residue and giving it a bit more of a surface, and again, like the walls, we can just go over lightly with the wire brush to create that wood texture again. And once that's done, a little bit of super glue in the back and we can just glue that neatly in place. Just testing it for fit there. Just put a little bit of super glue around the back and we can just, using those wooden door guidelines, using those guidelines from the wooden door, just glue that into place. And now we're ready to glue the whole thing together, so it just needs a little bit of glue on that one end wall there. And a little bit of gentle care, get it nice and square, and voila, we're done. I almost stuck my finger to the bottom there. So the last little bit we need to do on the cabin walls is just using the corner fillets that's on the template, cut out some narrow strips, and we're just going to cover those corners where it's all folded together. Just takes a little bit of care with the scalpel, and we can cut some nice thin strips. It's about 1mm. These bits are really quite fiddly to do, but it's worth doing just to finish off the corners. We've got these little pieces to add because of the way the material folds together, leaves a little groove. The next thing now, we're going to use that little window section I talked about putting on a thinner piece of card. I'm using a piece of cereal box card here, which is just about the right kind of thickness you need. So once the frame's cut out, we can now just put a little bit of super glue behind the aperture there and then stick the window in place like so. So with the window frame in place, we just need to add some little window sills, and we can use the same card and just use a little bit of super glue to gently stick that in place. So now we just need to add some framing to the door. I'm going to cut some more pieces of serial card. And just carefully glue them around the door frame. I'm just cutting each of these ones a little bit too long and then trimming to size. So go all the way around the top and then down both sides. The hinges from the template are also cut out of the thin cereal box card, taking great care to follow the edges of the shape. It's really quite fiddly at this size, but with a little bit of attention you can get a nice cut. I can just tack them down now with a little bit of super glue, just tease them in place with the tip of the scalpel. And with that done, I'm now just going to add some glue to the base of the hut and stick it down onto the base. And now that's stuck down, and you just need to drill a hole in the bottom to allow for the little bulb to stick through. Just making the hole a bit bigger with the scalpel, and now as you can see that fits perfectly in there. I'm going to stick it on a nice little angle so it's not square. And next what I want to do is just add some black acrylic paint to the inside to make it light safe for the bulb. Just covering the whole of the inside but not the frame of the window. Then I'm going to use a medium brown from Vallejo to paint the outside wooden panels. Just squirt a little bit on top of this makeshift palette and then gently paint the walls. And now with some green acrylic paint, just covering the corners and the windowsills and the window frames. So the next part we come to is the roof. Coming back to the template now, I'm just going to cut out these roof pieces. I'll cut out the rectangle of the roof. I don't want to cut out the whole thing, so you want to just leave the seam in the middle, and then we're just going to gently we're just going to gently scribe that with a shallow cut so we can then fold like so. Just give it a bit of a sand down so I can paint the inside black. There's just a piece that's not on the plan, but this is just putting a little strengthener between the two gable ends. Just a small piece of Foamex just to be able to push those gables straight, and gives us something extra to stick the roof onto. With a bit of super glue now all the way around the edges, we can stick that folded piece of roof base in place. And now with a bit more of that green, we can just paint the edges of the roof just to finish that bit off. Next we're going to come to the part of the template that has the little roof fascias. So just cut those off from the 1mm Foamex, just taking care to get all the angles correct. You can see it's a little bit fiddly, but it's worth persevering with just to get the profile right. Once those are cut, we can then just use a little bit of super glue to stick them in place. Just pinged a little bit off there. We've also cut out the diamond finials. So just a little bit of sticking to get them into place. And as always with Foamex, you just need to give it a little bit of a sand to give paint a key to stick to. And we'll go back over with a wire brush like everywhere else, just to give that a bit of wood grain. Just dip the finials into a spot of super glue and they can stick in place like so, front and back. And as the same as the edges of the roof, just paint those fascias with the same dark green, just that festive colour, just to tie it all together. Only needs to be a very rough coat. The paint covers quite well. It covers quite well if you've sanded off the fascia to begin with. Next I'm going to use a little bit of Nuln oil, that well-known Citadel colour. No, I'm not. This is actually Agrax Earthshade. I've the wrong paint, but this is Agrax Earthshade, so it's a dark brown colour, not black, but it just accentuates those wooden panels and comes into all the wood grain. Basically it just brings the shed walls to life. Brings the shed walls to life. Just covering the whole surface of the walls, give it a generous coat so allow it to settle in. And then those little hinges that we stuck on earlier, they just need to be given a coat of black. Just being very delicate with a small brush here. Now we come to the door handle. For that I've used a tiny little piece of wire. It's just a thin piece of jeweler's wire, and wrapping it around this little point here, which is about the kind of diameter that I need, and just give it a twist. That will create the loop that we want, with a little bit of a leg at the end to enable us to stick it into the door. So once we've got that twisted, I can just then cut it to size with a scalpel. You'll notice there's a little jumper ring at the side there. We're going to use that for something else. And just gluing it in place into a hole I've already pre-drilled into the door. Now for the wreath, as I said, I'm going to use a little jumper ring here. This is just the kind of thing that you get on the end of a key ring. But if you can't find a jumper ring, you can just make your own out of a piece of wire. Now, I went a little bit wrong. This was an experiment to begin with. I'm using some of that ground foam that I've used to make the hedge that you might have seen in the hedge video. If you haven't, go and check it out. Make your own foam with furniture foam and some acrylic paint with the aid of a coffee grinder to grind it all down. But what I've done here is I've applied it straight to the jumper ring without painting it first. So there's an awful lot of brass showing through. So I ditched that idea and then decided to get another jump ring and paint it with the same green that we did for the detail work on the shed there. And then once that's dry, we can apply glue to the jumper ring and add some more of that foam foliage. So the best way to apply glue for something this small is to just dab it on with a cocktail stick. And then once we've got glue all over it, we can liberally apply this ground foam, which represents a kind of festive foliage. And as you can see there, it's covered it quite nicely. Any spots that are missing, just dab a little bit more glue on and we can cover with a little bit more of the foam, like so. And we'll just tease it into place with a cocktail stick. Yeah, that's quite an effective looking wreath, don't you think? Hands in the background there to give it a bit of focus. The camera sometimes struggles. Now what we've got here is some very finely sieved sawdust that I've coloured red to give us some red foliage, and just putting some spots of super glue at the top there. I'm going to add some red sawdust to the top to represent a little bit of a festive bow, or the effect of poinsettia flowers. So we'll put some right at the very top, and then a couple of little dabs either side will give us a little bit more. You see, that makes a very nice looking Christmas wreath. Then once that's all done, we'll just tease it in place a little bit more. We can glue that onto the front of the door with a dab of super glue. Sometimes it doesn't quite play. Now then, to finish off the wooden panels, I'm just going to dry brush a lighter shade of brown just to give it a bit of a more worn appearance. Go all the way around the cabin walls, very lightly brushing with very little paint left on your brush, and it just gives a little bit of more emphasis to the walls. I'm now going to super glue the cabin to the base and just put it on a nice little angle, as we've said before. Stick it firmly in place, and now that's ready for the snow to be applied. For the snow, I'm going to use a mixture of PVA glue, which is quite difficult to get out once you've got a half empty bottle. So I'll put a small quantity of PVA glue, an equal quantity of white acrylic paint, and a generous spoonful of bicarbonate of soda. Now this is the magic ingredient. It's going to make a nice looking paste. So we just mix that up with a not a cocktail stick, a wooden stick, and gently smooth it on top of the shed. Now if you've got the consistency just right, it does go on nice and smooth, and it lets you push it around a bit. So it's not too sloppy and not too stiff, but if it's, like I say, if it's just the right kind of consistency, it will enable you to just gently tease and push the snow effect into place. So once the roof's done, it's worth just covering up the rest of the base with the snow paste. As you can see, it will just gently push right up to the edges, so we don't have to worry about making a mess. It will just gently knead and push into place. It's worth persevering just a little bit to get the effect you want. We'll go right up to the edges of the base there, and then just a little bit of smoothing onto the roof. We just want it to look like the snow is sort of appearing a little bit heavy on the roof there. So just take a little bit of time prodding it into place. Now I want to create a little bit of a snow path here, so with the edge of my stick I'm just creating a little path there. And on top of that we just sprinkle a little bit more bicarbonate of soda, just to give the surface a bit more of a glistening powdery texture. And to finish off, just add a little bit more of the bicarbonate of soda powder, initially with the wooden stick, and then teasing it better in place with a small paintbrush. We can then add a little bit of a frosting of powder over the top of the wreath and down the door, and you can just have a little bit of a play here. Add as much or as little as you want. I'm adding some more frosting powder to the edge, just making it look like there's been a little bit of wind-blown snow sticking to the edge. And then to finish off the edge of the base, just add a little bit more of that mixture of snow powder, snow gunk, whatever you want to call it, and we just smooth that all the way around the edges, just to mask the top from the sides. And as a further finishing touch, with a hot glue gun we can just create some little icicles. You have to work really quickly here before the glue sets, but if we can just use the tip of a cocktail stick to tease and pull the glue down in place, and once we've got it as we want it, they make quite effective little icicles. So here we are, it's done. If you like my content, please let me know in the comments, give me a like, share with your friends, and maybe consider subscribing. I'll be your friend forever. As promised in the last video, well done to Wonky Wears Bude, Ernest Wanderer 2471, Marble Beauty Marbling, and Brad Craig 6676 for correctly naming Granny Weatherwax in the portrait above the fire. I'd like to thank my Ko-fi Club subscribers for continuing to support me. If you'd like to join my list of supporters, the link to my Ko-fi is below in the description. It's like Patreon but takes less of a cut, and for just £3 a month you get access to my Discord channel for behind the scenes pictures and videos, a lovely community chat group, and access to direct messages. As the channel grows, the perks will too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.